Welcome and thank you for your company for this edition of Resource PNG. For this program, we talked to 4 different organizations who are heavily involved in the resource sector. We talked to Brunel, a company that sources personnel for the oil and gas industry. Another company that has done much work in PNG is Eaglewood Energy, that has a stake in the Western Province. And finally, Wadzilla, a company that knows a lot about engines and power. But first, we talked to the Managing Director of Bougainville Copper Limited, Peter Taylor. Here is that interview with Anya Geno.
Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you.
Peter, Rio Tinto has recently shown renewed interest in Papua New Guinea. Can you explain what exploration leases you've taken up and what activity are you undertaking in these areas?
Yes, well, of course, that's Rio Tinto and not Bougainville Copper, but I can certainly confirm that Rio Tinto has had 3 exploration licenses granted. And my understanding is at the moment they're doing aeromagnetic surveys over those particular licenses.
Now, landowners in Panguna have indicated that they'd like Bougainville Copper Limited to reopen the mine, and there's been some limited negotiations. Do you hold high hopes for a breakthrough agreement in the next 5 years?
It's a complex process because the mine operated under a national government piece of legislation. The Bougainville Copper Agreement itself is actually enshrined in legislation. So we have to keep that in the back of our mind, but for the future, the most important element for reopening the mine, as far as I'm concerned, is the cooperation and support of the landowners. Yes. Next, of course, is the government itself and the community at large. There's been quite a bit of progress made in reconciling landowners. There are, at this stage, I believe, 6 landowner groups that have been registered and are in the process of forming a united group, and that group then will be in a position to negotiate with the other parties, which are the company, of course, the national government and the Bougainville government.
So how far away are you looking at?
Well, Bougainville Copper is not actually involved directly with the formation of that landowner group. The autonomous government of Bougainville is leading there, and I think they've made a good deal of progress, and they have said that they're hopeful that early next year this united group will be ready to go, ready to come to the negotiating table.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, so how large an investment will be involved in reopening the mine?
Well, we don't know the precise figure. We know it's going to be billions of dollars. A couple of years ago, we did what in the industry we call an order of magnitude study, which is only accurate to plus or minus 30%, but that indicated it's going to cost several $billion. We're now in the process of updating that study, so by, I hope, the end of this year or early next year, I'll be in a position to let the market know our latest estimates.
So would you be looking at a similar scale to operations prior to the shutdown?
In terms of operating size, I would say the previous scale of operation is the minimum rather than the maximum. Quite often these things are determined by the equipment that's available in the marketplace. You actually you process with these units that can handle a certain number of tonnes, and they come in multiples. So if we've got 2 of them, obviously it'll be about, I'd say about the same as we had before, which is about 50 million tonnes a year. Right. If we took on another unit, of course, you go 50% up again. So, and we're in the process now of looking at the economies of scale. It's very important in these low-grade but large operations that you get the actual mining rate right.
Right.
More of that interview after the break. In this part of Mr. Taylor's interview, he talks about the possible redevelopment plans for the Panguna mine. That alone would mean talking to landowners, the government, both in Port Moresby and on Bougainville, and then raising the funds to restart the mine. Let us pick up where we left off in that interview.
Now, you've stated publicly on many occasions that this is BCL's vision, and that's to reopen the mine. Can you give us an overview of where your redevelopment plans are?
Yes, I can. As I said before, paramount to us reopening the mine is the support of the landowners and the government and the community at large. We're now in the process, with the cooperation of both the landowners and both governments, of getting together an agenda so we can sit around a table and work on what will be the mining regime for the future at Panguna.
Right.
So that's progressed, I think, quite a way. As I said earlier, it is very important to have that United Landowner Group formed so that they can send their representatives along to actually engage with the other parties.
Right. Do you think those are the most pressing issues for the reopening, the landowner issues?
Well, that's number one. Without the support of the landowners, I can't imagine that the mine will reopen in the near future.
Right. There have been reports that a United Landowner Group is being formed to negotiate with BCL. Can you tell us how that's progressing?
I believe it's progressing very well. It's not there's not Bougainville Copper that's actually that's working with the landowners on that particular group at the moment, but it's the autonomous government.
Right.
But it's been doing a marvellous job, in my view. It has now had 6 landowner groups registered, and there are a couple of other groups that are not yet registered, but we believe that will happen in a relatively short period of time. Once they've formed a united group and have elected their representatives, that's the last step we need before all the parties can get around the table and start discussing the future of the mine.
So would you say you have the support of the autonomous government of Bougainville and of President Momis?
Oh, absolutely. President Momis just recently at the joint meeting between the national government and the autonomous government said that reopening the mine is his #1 priority. And I can understand why, because the economy of Bougainville needs a shot in the arm.
Yes.
And a project of this size is the only thing in the short to medium term that's going to provide that economic base that Bougainville so dearly needs.
What about mining laws?
Mining laws are a difficulty for us at the moment, because when the mine was first developed, it was back in the days when Papua New Guinea was not independent, so it was legislation
That's right.
handed to PNG by the Australian government. Then it became national legislation, and the Papua New Guinea government enshrined the Bougainville Copper Agreement, which is an agreement between the company and the national government, into legislation. So technically and legally at the moment, the mining lease is issued by the national government, and the terms of reference for operating at Bougainville are national government laws and regulations. Now, under the peace agreement with Bougainville, it's been agreed that mining powers can be transferred to Bougainville, and indeed Bougainville has asked for the transfer of those powers. So until that happens, it's not possible for Bougainville to put in place its own legislation to govern mining on Bougainville, but my understanding is that the legislation's in the process of being drafted, so hopefully that whole process will be completed sometime next year.
Is it your opinion that greater control or participation by the local level government would certainly go a long way towards better integration with landowners, or working closer with them?
The closer we can work with the local people, be that the landowners, the larger community and the local government, the better, because we're actually operating on their land and in their territory. So we'd like to deal directly with them if possible. So I support the process of transferring powers to Bougainville. The question for us is, what will the legislation be like?
Yes.
Will it be the same as or similar to the Papua New Guinea legislation, in which case I don't have any problems because we understand how it works. It's had now a long history, several decades of working very successfully, and as one can see from the investment from the sector in Papua New Guinea now, it does encourage investment, and that's a very good thing for
Yes.
Papua New Guinea. So if that's what happens on Bougainville, if it's basically Bougainville operating very similar laws to Papua New Guinea, it should work quite well, I'd say.
Yes, it should. How difficult do you think it will be to fund the reopening of the mine?
Right now, any resource project of this size would have difficulty in raising billions of dollars. That's just the way the world economy is right now.
Yes.
So it's got that issue along with all other projects, but I think Bougainville has some additional potential issues. After all, it has had a couple of decades of unrest, which the rest of the world doesn't fully understand. So when we go out into amongst investors or the financial community and say we'd like to borrow or raise several $billion, they're going to want to know a lot about Bougainville and its recent history.
Right.
And that's going to need some very careful management, and it's going to need the cooperation of all the parties supporting the application for those funds. And by that I mean the national government, the Bougainville government, the company, the landowners and the community. All those parties need to be very positive and very supportive for us to raise those funds.
Yes. Is a referendum something that could affect your ability to raise funds?
I think it could, because if you try and put yourself in the shoes of a lender, and there's this question of what Bougainville is going to be in the future. Is it going to be part of Papua New Guinea, in which case the regime is well understood, and I think by and large by the financial community well supported. They've been able to fund very big projects and are continuing to do so. A newly independent Bougainville, or when the question hasn't been decided, I'm not too sure, because you know if it's the newest Pacific nation, or indeed the newest nation in the world, what does that mean to a lender? There is then no history, no experience of large borrowings, so there could be difficulties.
With any mining project, a lot has to go into managing expectations of all those involved. As a company, Bougainville Copper Limited is not new to this. However, a lot has changed since the Panguna mine shut down. Technology has changed, and so has the world's economic conditions. Those are the many factors that the company has to consider as it looks at the potential of restarting the mine.
Now, there seems to be a view among some people that reopening the mine will fund just about everything Bougainville could wish for.
Yes, and I think that's pretty much the story with most major projects that are developed in Papua New Guinea. There really needs to be a reality check here. Managing expectations is one of the important and can be difficult issues for any major developer. It's not as if you're not literally filling wheelbarrows up with gold. There's a lot of money to be spent in actually extracting the minerals and selling them. Then you've got to look at what the margin is, not what the gross value is, and see what's available. Obviously, investors expect to get a return. So if they don't believe they'll get a return on their investment, they won't make it. And if they don't make that investment, then the community doesn't get a return. So we need to do a bit of balancing here and understand each other's issues, each other's aspirations and wishes, and compromise.
So considering all these issues, how long do you think it will before the mine actually reopens?
The starting date can't be actually set at this stage, because, as I said earlier, we need to have quite extensive negotiations between all the parties to come up with an acceptable regime for everybody, mining regime, including the conditions under which the mine will operate. But once you get to the stage of saying, yes, we've got all that, and assuming the Bougainville government will process the mining applications and so on in a reasonable time, a build period for an operation of this size is usually at least 3 years. And it might sound like a long time, but when you think of the size and scale of the operation, roads to be built, ports, towns, all of those sorts of things, and you've got to order machinery which might take a year or two to build somewhere in the world and then have it shipped in and put in place, that's not an unrealistic period. So, you know, 5 years, I would say, is not an unrealistic period, but it may actually be longer than that. It just depends on these negotiations that have to take place and how long that it takes to complete that. And of course, then you've got to look at world conditions in the industry at the time that you're ready to push the button to go.
That's right. Now, the environment is often raised as a major issue. What are your plans for tailings disposals?
Yes, well, the reality is you can't have a mine without overburden and tailings. That's just part of the output of the mine. It's not just the minerals. So they've got to go somewhere. Fortunately though, since the early days of Bougainville copper, technology's moved on, so we now have options we didn't have before. So we're looking at all the options now, including the possibility of keeping the tailings on land somewhere around the mine site. And when we've got to do the technical studies, and we're in the process of doing that, but when they're available, we will be tabling all of those, and all of the parties will discuss between them what they prefer in terms of environment.
Do you have plans to set up an office in Bougainville?
Yes, we do. We'd love to go back. That's part of the vision, and we have actually been discussing with the autonomous government on Bougainville that possibility. President Momus is very favourably disposed to us setting up an office. We could set up an office initially in Booker, where the administration is, but the administration itself has expressed a desire to move to Arawa, or at least to set up an office in Arawa. Now, if they were to do that, that could well be the appropriate trigger point for BCL to follow.
Now, BCL is credited with operating one of the best technical training facilities in the Pacific region. Will you have a similar facility if the mine reopens?
Our training facility was well recognised as one of the best, and indeed even today the legacy of that facility is providing skilled workers for much of the rest of the resources industry in Papua New Guinea now, and indeed in Australia. But to answer your question, it's absolutely my desire to replicate that facility, and if we can do better, we'll do better.
Now, the Bougainville Copper Foundation has continued to provide scholarships for Bougainville students. Do you see its community support role increasing?
Well, I should declare that I'm chairman of the foundation as well, so I can speak on behalf of the foundation. It's been one of the real success stories. Even during the worst part of the crisis, the foundation was still providing medical supplies into Bougainville. It was still providing educational scholarships. I think those sorts of activities need to not only continue but be escalated. The issue at the moment for the foundation is funding. It's got some funding which was initially provided by Bougainville Copper, and indeed the board of the company has agreed that it will continue to fund the foundation. But of course, once we've got the mine up and running and we've got a good cash flow, we can do even more. So yes, I would see the foundation as expanding, but it needs to have input from the community, of course, because what it's doing really, its aim is to do what the community wants. It's not just a foundation for foundation's sake.
And what other community benefits do you see the mine providing?
Obviously, there's direct employment at the mine, there's economic stimulus, there's money flowing from production and so on. But we estimate in the industry that something in the order of 5 to 6 jobs are created in a community for every one of the direct employees. So we see many, many thousands of people, Bougainvillians I hope, are being employed outside of the direct mining operation. But in addition to that, it's the opportunity it creates for small business. It allows local business people to actually provide goods and services to the mining operation. And typically of these types of operations, we will positively discriminate in favour of local people and local businesses. So it's a churn, if you like. It churns, it's not just the money coming out of the mine, it churns in the community several times, many multiples, and creates the sort of activity that Bougainville really needs.
Right. And how optimistic are you that the mine will reopen?
I'm very optimistic. At the end of the day, it's really quite simple. If the Bougainville government, the landowners, the community and the company have all got the will and support the reopening of the mine, and provided of course copper and gold prices stay at an economic level to reopen, it will reopen.
Last question. What's Bougainville Copper learnt from pre-shutdown, and how is it going to operate differently this time?
Well, that's a fair question. If you go back in history, and I think you need to go back in history to understand the circumstances in which it opened. It was pre-independence. The Australian government, being pushed by the United Nations to give former dependencies independence. Mm-hmm. Australia was looking for some economic activity that would underwrite the economy of Papua New Guinea. that particular ore body was around, it was known, the company was encouraged to open it, and I'm afraid to say the community wasn't consulted as it would be today. Right. So it got off, in terms of the community, got off to a rather poor start. That won't happen this time. As I've said a number of times today, my number one priority are landowners, the community as a whole has to be engaged, and also the government of Bougainville itself. So that will be the fundamental difference. It'll be engagement with the local community.
Thank you so much for your time, Peter Taylor.
It's a pleasure.
Brunel is a business that specializes on providing professionals in every discipline in the field of oil and gas. Anya Geno had a chat with Brunel International Southeast Asia General Manager Raywin Penny.
My next guest is Raywin Penny, the General Manager for Brunel Energy. Raywin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here.
Now, Raywin, perhaps you can tell us about Brunel Energy.
Well, Brunel are a specialist recruitment organisation. We're global and we provide specialist individuals to the oil and gas and the mining industries.
Okay, and so in Papua New Guinea, your presence here is how large, or where are you based?
Well, globally, we're actually 90 offices in 35 countries. Obviously, we've got our base in Port Moresby. We've been up there since 2007. We primarily came in on the back of the Esso Highlands run PNG LNG project. We have a global services agreement with ExxonMobil, so we typically follow them into all of their locations where they have projects. And so we set up our office there 5 years ago now.
Right, and how has the experience been for Brunel?
I think like any new global entity into a remote location like that, it's been a challenge. It's certainly had them since the outset, but it's been a steep learning curve for all of us, and it makes it a lot easier when you're attached to a multinational like ExxonMobil and their subsidiary Esso. It certainly makes it easier to get your operations up and running. But we're quite satisfied where we are. Naturally, we'd like to be more advanced than we currently are, but we're making progress in the right area.
Right. Yeah. Who else are your large clients in Papua New Guinea?
We're working along with Interoil and also with Oil Search. We're also aligned with some of the EPC contractors that are now moved in and working and align themselves with the project. So we're now looking to expand primarily into the mining, as we've started up a new division out of Australia. So that certainly is going to get a lot of focus over the next 12 months.
Right. I imagine operating in Papua New Guinea would have its issues, and certainly supplying human capital. What have you encountered, or what's been your experience?
I think in hindsight the biggest issues that's been confronting us as a partner to these major clients is, given that a lot of major projects have come online, not only in Australia but also in Papua New Guinea and globally, trying to attract the best people for those locations and then to retain them. I mean, attrition rates it's always a challenge with the environment, right. The remoteness and the nature of the project. But given that we are global and we are attached to most of the major oil and gas and mining projects in the world, we typically try to have relocate our specialists globally so that there's no downtime for clients on the ground.
Right. So in your experience, is the PNG resource industry a lucrative proposition for people wanting to work?
Absolutely. In terms of career and complexity of the nature of the projects, to work on some of these, particularly like the PNG LNG project, for example, the nature and the scope of being involved with a project of that degree, it's a significant career enhancement for any individual, and also being working with those companies, it can only do well for you moving forward. But right. And we would like to think that that's the benefit of aligning with a company like Brunel. We are global, we are international, and naturally we like to retain that specialist knowledge in Papua New Guinea as long as we can. But in the event that we can't, we'd always look to relocate those people somewhere else on a global project.
Right, right. Apart from the rate of attrition, are there any issues that you've encountered, and has there been improvement?
I'd like to say one of the significant improvements that we've personally experienced, I guess on an operational level, would be things like immigration. In the early stages, I guess it was more of a steep learning curve for us, but we're very fortunate in that the primary interface with immigration is primarily our major clients, and they almost pave the way for us to come through. And we do find now that's a lot more efficient process. We are getting people through a lot easier. It's like anything, we still have some roadblocks, but primarily it's a lot more efficient process that we undertake.
So Raywin, what sets you apart from your competitors?
That's a good one. Well, we are global, like I mentioned before. We have the global experience. We also now, I'm proud to say, we've got the local capability. I think when you're a global leader in what you do and you come into a marketplace like PNG, you really do need to have some local knowledge, and I'd like to think now, after a number of years and experiencing and working through solutions with clients, we have a lot more capability on the ground operationally, logistically. Our knowledge has increased. So yeah, we've certainly improved over that period of time.
So what do you use as an attractive proposition for prospective human recruiting?
One of the major draw cards, particularly to potential contractors, is alignment with some of the major projects and major clients. Being able to be a critical path of all of those projects that are not easy by nature. I mean, they're very technical, geographically, they're amazing. So it's fairly easy to attract individuals to want to become a part and a success of all of those projects. Right. And another thing too is contractors need to be confident that we understand the business in Papua New Guinea. A lot of them do have concerns on a number of issues, a whole range of issues, and they need the confidence that Brunel understand the climate that they're working on. We recognise the challenges on the ground, and it's a part and parcel of that. We use that experience to try to retain them on those projects.
Right. And your future projections for Brunel's involvement definitely in Papua New Guinea?
Yeah, well, initially, given that we have global contracts with ExxonMobil, we typically would come into a location and it's for the duration of a project. Now, given that they're already 70% through, we would typically move on, but we are actually going to remain in Papua New Guinea. Okay. We see that there's a significant future there for us, not only with our oil and gas, but also expanding into the mining. So we see a very prosperous future for us there.
So it sounds like prosperous times ahead, Raywin. Thank you for your time today.
No, thank you for having me.
Raywin Penny, General Manager of Brunel Energy.
Don't go away. After the break, we speak with Eaglewood Energy about their interest in PNG. Eaglewood Energy has various areas of interest in PNG, namely Western Province, East Sepik, and Cape Vogel. We had a chat with Eaglewood Energy's President and Chief Operating Officer, Michael McGowan.
Welcome, Michael. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Michael, could you please start with telling us something about Eaglewood Energy?
Yes, certainly. Eaglewood Energy is a Canadian TSX-listed upstream oil and gas exploration company. Mm-hmm. We're purely focused on Papua New Guinea. We don't operate anywhere else in the world. We have 4 licenses in the country, 2 frontier exploration licenses in Cape Vogel and 1 in the Sepik. And we have 2 other licenses, an exploration license and a retention license in the Western Province of PNG. PRL 28 is our retention license, and that is the home of our Ubuntu discovery, which we made just over a year ago, about a year and a half ago now.
Okay, that's great. And how did PNG entrust you, as that's the only country where you're operating?
I and my colleagues actually have quite a long history with the country. I first came to Papua New Guinea in 1993 when I worked with British Petroleum. I was a drilling engineer on some of the early Hides wells, which are now the backbone of the PNG LNG project. I then came back to the country when some of my old BP colleagues got involved with oil search. I was involved when oil search bought out Chevron's assets in PNG. And then in 2007, with some oil search colleagues, left oil search and got involved in starting a new venture, which is Eaglewood Energy.
Okay, that's been a long journey. It seems
Yes,
like.
and I love the country, and hence I keep coming back.
Okay, that's right. And how much have you invested in PNG until now?
As Eaglewood Energy, since early 2008, we've invested or caused to invest about $150 million. Predominantly that investment has been in seismic and in the drilling of wells.
Okay. And what are your future plans in the country?
Well, our future plans to grow the business focus on firstly getting our Ubuntu discovery developed and into production. And we've just recently applied for a petroleum processing facility license and a pipeline license to start that production. That would see us being able to produce gas condensate. The next phase would be to look for a home for our gas, and we're very focused on trying to find a domestic market for our gas, and we want to offer Papua New Guinea a low-cost gas solution to see industry sparked off in certain areas of the Western Province, or perhaps in support of some of the resource projects. Beyond that, we will continue to explore in our Western Province license and also in our frontier licenses in Cape Vogel and in the CPIC.
Are you facing any challenges while doing your business in PNG?
I think the biggest challenge of doing business in PNG is logistics and geography. It is a difficult country in terms of access and moving large pieces of equipment around. So that's a challenge, but we all know that's a challenge. The other challenge at the moment has been the influx of lots of work into the country around the LNG project and some of the mining developments, actually putting a big strain on labour, and it's getting harder and harder for the basically the labour skills to keep up with the pace at which the country is starting to develop. That is quite a challenge.
That was very interesting, Michael. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you very much, Mega. You're welcome, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. So this was Michael McGowan from Eaglewood Energy.
When we come back, we talk about engines and power. To drive any resource project in PNG, you need electricity and lots of it. A company that is familiar with the industry needs is Wärtsilä. Here's an interview conducted by Festus Maigenep, who talked to Raymond Vinton, Wärtsilä's sales manager for the Oceania region.
Welcome, Raymond.
Thank you for the invite.
So, Wärtsilä, how long have you been operating in Papua New Guinea? And just what do you do in the resource sector?
Well, Wärtsilä have been in Papua New Guinea for some 30 years now. Not actually based there, but working with mines, Oktedi, the shipping. Many of the coastal traders use Wärtsilä engines. So we've always had a presence there for some 30 odd years. It used to be run out of Singapore, but then we opened an office in Sydney, then we ran it out of Sydney. But 2008, we decided it's time we open an office, which we put into the Motukea Island, and that's running exceptionally well.
So you mentioned about Oktedi, Lihir. So what kind of services do you provide these companies?
Well, initially with those projects, we sold engines, we sold power stations, and then we've come in with the resources to maintain the equipment, to assist with spare parts. So Lihir, for instance, some 18 years ago, when they first got started, we sold them their first station. We've since added a floating power station, and now some more generator sets on site. So they've been a very good partner for us. We have some 172 megawatt now on the Lihir Island.
So how do you see the economic potential for your investment in Papua New Guinea?
Well, we see extreme growth for ourselves because we have the sort of equipment that's needed in the region. It can start off robust on pretty nasty fuels, and then the same equipment can change over to gas, and the whole region's full of gas if we can get some.
So I get you trying to tap into the cleaner energy?
Yes, it's more for the cleaner fuels and the cheaper fuels. Anything you don't have to go. All the fuels at the moment have to be bought offshore, except for some of the fuel coming out of Interoil, I suppose. But for natural gases and some of the cleaner fuels, carbon fuels, you have it already on site. It's just a matter of harvesting it and releasing it to the market.
So what are your future growth plans?
Well, we've grown out of our boots already. It's just been only a short period that we've had an office there, and we're seeing so much business now. It's really going well. We started off with 6 or 7 people. We're now up to almost 40. Plenty of nationals. We steal all the good guys, so we know who all the good guys are up there. So we take those and use them working in the region. So we see a lot of growth. Motikia, they're putting in floating dock or dry docks now. There'll be graving docks, so ships will be coming in, bigger ships will be coming in. We have all the ship services from the shaft seals right the way through to the gearboxes and the engines. So we see quite a bit of potential.
Mm-hmm. So you're in Oceania. Apart from Papua New Guinea, is there other establishments you have around the Pacific?
Yes, well we look after Australia, of course, and then outside Australia we have New Zealand. We've got 32 megawatt in Fiji for the Fiji Electricity Authority. We go right up to Guam and then across to Kiribati. So we cover 21, 22 nations in the Pacific from Australia.
For your potential clients, is there anything you'd like to make a point to them?
Oh, I think the main thing is that when you look at Wärtsilä, we're one of the market leaders. We generate 1% of the world's electricity with our power side. On the marine, we have every third ship you see go by has our engines in. The big cruise liners are coming through, the World, the Mary, a lot of the bulk carriers. We have the equipment for everybody else's production, so for ships or marine and power. We're now also moving into, we bought Hamworthy. Now Hamworthy is an offshore oil and gas company. We see serious moves in the oil and gas fields, so that's why we've bought those. So yes, we have a lot to offer for the potential customer.
Thank you, Raymond, for coming on board our show.
Okay, thank you for inviting us.
Well, viewers, that was Raymond Vinton, the Oceania Sales Manager for Wärtsilä.
That's it for another program of Resource PNG. You're welcome to view this presentation again at our Resource PNG page at www.mtv.com.pg, and do email us if you have any suggestions or queries. Until the next time, have a pleasant week.